I want to make another installment in that feministing science thing I've been doing. Specifically, in case this is the first one you've seen, it's to do with this supposed quotation from Luce Irigaray that E equals mc squared, Einstein's relativity equation, is, as she puts it, a gendered equation. A gendered equation that has a gender. Does that make any sense? And ultimately it comes out of a comment that Dana Garrett made, attributed to Sandra Harding, that the speed of light possibly varied according to the political and gender orientation of the person measuring it. I'm not going to go with that last one because I don't think that makes any sense. But I wanted to stay with the first bit. Luce Irigaray, French feminist theorist. Does it make any sense? I mean, my understanding, it's I'm kind of working second or third hand on this, is that what she's talking about there is not so much that extreme version I just suggested about the speed of light varying, but about the nature of equations and the possibility that some language, some concepts, some ideas that might feature in equations could be said to be gendered. And what I think she's coming out of there is ideas that Helen Cixous also talks about in that well-known essay of hers that's been a bit of a millstone around her neck, I think. An essay called Sorties, which is not really representative of what she talked about, but it's really interesting. And in Sorties, Helen Cixous basically says, that we divide the world into two parts. We do the binary thing. We do the hot, cold, up, down, left, right, good, bad, black, white thing. That's one of the things that we do. It's an epistemological process. I have to say this is supported by some brain research more recently, but she wasn't talking about it in those terms. But what Cixous says is that the primary division is the gender one, because gender is so important to human beings and to all mammals that use sexual reproduction as a technique to further their genetic material. That division becomes very primary, and a lot of our thinking and a lot of our cultures and a lot of the practices we engage in, a lot of our language, orients itself around that primary division, because it's such a salient one, and has been such a salient one for such a long time in our histories. So all of the things on one side of the divide tends to cluster together, and all the things on the other side of the binary divide cluster together, and the one on the top of each of those divides is male on one side and female on the other. And you can kind of feel that, when you talk about soft and hard. You ask anybody and they'll tell you which side male goes on and which side female goes on. They'll probably qualify it, but it's very intuitively obvious. Even things like up, down, we might feel less comfortable about that. But many people will have an intuitive sense of which one fits the logic of the binary divide. Even things like left, right, active, passive, those kinds of terms. So, where am I going with that? Yeah, so Cixous makes that division, puts that idea in operation. Luce Irigaray, kind of uses that as the basis for this E equals mc squared. And what she's basically saying is that some properties of nature, including speed, she says, fit on the male side intuitively. We associate speed on an intuitive level, not a logical level, but an intuitive level, with masculinity, maleness. And we might I'm not quite sure what the opposite sign of that binary divide would be. Probably location, I guess. Coming from Heisenberg, maybe, because those are complementary things, aren't they? Velocity and location. So maybe location would be on one side and speed would be on the other. And for Luce Irigaray, speed is on the male half of that binary divide. And you can kind of see that. I mean, boys like fast cars. My kids are really into cars. John, particularly one of my lads, he's down at Santa Pod Raceway today for some show with cars. God, looking at fast cars, and he spends all his time on the internet looking at cars and talking about them. And I can remember that. I used to have motorbikes when I was a lad, and and the attraction of speed was very, very important. And it seemed to be a guy thing, and maybe it still is. And that's not to say that only men can indulge in those kind of things or can talk about those things. But there does seem to be an implicit association, and someone should probably run the implicit association test with speed and location. Maybe I will at one point, to see if it correlates. So I think at least part of what she's saying when she's talking about E equals mc squared being a gendered equation comes out of that because speed features in that equation, and the fastest speed there is, the most male speed, the biggest, well, I don't want to go any further with that, but yeah, the most, because it's about most, actually mostness is probably a male thing too. Anyway, I think that's part of the groundings for it. Yeah. I mean, it's probably pretty obvious by now. These are kind of sociological, psychological, cultural studies, humanities kinds of questions. You know what I mean? I don't know how you would scientifically, empirically demonstrate that speed is a male concern, other than by demonstrating that it appears in male psychological profiling within things like the implicit association test. Yeah. And yeah, there's some gaps in this series. I've jumped quite far on, but I'll try and fill in some of the gaps in this feministing science thing.